Welcome to a deep dive into something, well, incredibly practical and valuable for pretty much everyone, how to learn English effectively. But here's the twist: we're focusing on doing it without all that usual stress and confusion. We've got a really fantastic set of sources today, just packed with real-world tips. They promise to make the whole process feel surprisingly simple, maybe even fun, and definitely practical. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, what's really fascinating about these sources, I think, is how they kind of shatter that myth that language learning has to be this, monumental, overwhelming task. They really break it down into clear, manageable steps. It's much less about sort of traditional classroom rules and more about weaving English into your actual daily life. So our goal today is really to pull out those strategies that have the most impact.
Exactly. Think of this deep dive as maybe your personal shortcut to gaining fluency and confidence, whether you're prepping for a big meeting, trying to get up to speed in a new field, or maybe you're just really curious about how language acquisition actually works. We're aiming to give you those aha moments, the kind that make the learning really stick, not just for today, but, well, for good.
Yeah.
So let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental mindset shift the sources highlight right away. We often think we need to learn everything all at once, right? But that's apparently a huge misconception.
Yeah.
What's the core idea here? Why is starting small so powerful?
Oh, it's crucial. The material really emphasizes that instead of some vague goal like improve English, which, let's face it, can feel huge and daunting, you need to get specific, really specific. And it's not just about making a neat list. It's more about activating your brain's reward system effectively. When you break down a big task into these smaller, achievable chunks, well, neuroscience shows that's much better for building habits long term. That makes total sense. And the material gives concrete examples too, like wanting to speak fluently and understand movies better. Then it's just setting these little goals, like maybe watching one English video a day or learning 5 new words each week.
Mm.
So the key takeaway here, the foundation really is consistency. It's about building those small daily habits that just add up over time.
Okay, so once you've got those bite-sized goals set, a really common challenge people face, especially if they don't live in an English-speaking country, is that feeling of, how can I really immerse myself? How do the sources tackle that?
Right, and this brings up an important distinction. It's between what you might call environmental immersion, just being in an English-speaking place, and active engagement. Environmental immersion can happen passively, but what the sources are really highlighting is active engagement. That means intentionally interacting with the language, wherever you happen to be. It's kind of like the difference between just standing in a forest versus actively looking for specific plants or trails. You absolutely can bring English into your life, no matter your location.
That's a great way to put it. And the sources list really practical things you can do, like reading short articles online or watching English shows with subtitles on. Maybe start with a show you already love, right? Makes it easier. Or listening to music or podcasts. I love that specific tip they mentioned about listening to a podcast, even when you're doing chores. It almost makes it sound effortless.
Yeah, the core idea is simple. The more you hear and read English, the faster you'll improve. It's just about that constant low-stakes exposure.
Okay, so you're constantly hearing and seeing English. The next logical step is starting to actively produce it. But how do you do that without the pressure, of a real conversation staring you down?
Yeah.
Our sources suggest a surprisingly simple method, maybe even a little quirky: talking to yourself.
Huh. Yeah, it might sound a bit silly at first blush, but it's not just idle chatter. It's actually a zero-pressure way to activate your speaking muscles, to practice forming thoughts in English without worrying about judgment. Think of it like a mental rehearsal. And the sources also give another simple, consistent practice for the writing side of things, too.
Absolutely. So beyond the self-talk, the recommendation is to write down your day in a journal. Even just a few lines help. And what's great here is it isn't about perfect grammar initially. It's just about the act of expressing yourself.
Exactly.
And, of course, they also point to modern tools, like apps, Duolingo, HelloTalk. They mention these can also make it fun, like a game.
Gamification.
Which turns practice into something you might actually want to do, not just feel you have to do. Okay, vocabulary, we've all been there. You learn a new word, you feel pretty good about it.
And then 2 days later, poof, gone.
Exactly, it's just vanished. So how do the sources tackle this common frustration? They offer a pretty clever hack for actually building your word bank.
Yeah, this is where the material gets into something really effective, focusing on active recall and contextualization. Active recall, for anyone not familiar, it's essentially testing yourself. It's way more powerful than just rereading something. because it forces your brain to actually retrieve the information, which strengthens the memory trace. Like doing a rep at the gym, but for your brain.
Right, a mental workout.
Precisely. A mental workout for your words.
That's so smart. So the practical advice is to keep a small notebook just for new words. Seems simple enough. And for each word, you should write down the word itself, what it means, and importantly, a sentence using it. They give a great example, like, I'm grateful for my family.
Using it makes it stick.
Right. That technique, because it forces you to actively use the word and connect it to something personal, that's what helps you really remember words. It gives it context. Now, the internet, it's just this vast ocean of resources, right? And it can feel overwhelming trying to figure out what's actually useful. Our sources help navigate that a bit, pointing to some great, often free tools. What's the main takeaway on using these online resources?
Well, the big emphasis seems to be on accessibility, definitely, but also crucially on connecting with real people. Self-study is fantastic. It gets you a long way. But that human interaction piece, that's often what's missing. It's about taking the theory and actually putting it into practice, getting over that natural hesitation we all have when speaking a new language.
Yeah, that makes sense. They give specific recommendations like USA Learns and the British Council's Learn English site. Both are excellent free resources. But the real game changer they highlight seems to be finding language exchange partners, so you can actually talk with real people.
That feedback loop.
Exactly. It's one thing to understand English passively, but it's completely different to articulate your own thoughts and hear immediate responses. That's where fluency really starts to blossom, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's moving from input to output.
Okay, finally, we get to maybe the most important part, but often the most overlooked, the mental game. So you set your goals, you're trying to live with the language, you're practicing, but what happens when that initial motivation starts to fade? Or when you just feel stuck? What do the sources say about that?
Yeah, this part really underscores the very human side of learning, the ups and the downs. And it provides some really essential psychological strategies to just keep you going. The sources are clear, learning takes time, and feeling like you're not improving, that's normal. The absolute key, they say, is simply don't stop. It's about perseverance, sure, but it's also about reframing how you see the whole process.
That reframing seems huge. The advice include things like celebrate small wins, little victories.
Right, which actually helps rewire your brain. It makes you seek out more of those positive learning moments.
And keeping it fun, like watching shows you love, sing English songs, not letting it become a total chore. And maybe most importantly, don't be afraid of making mistakes.
Yes.
That line, mistakes mean you're trying, is so powerful. It's about seeing errors not as failures, but as like data points.
Exactly. Invaluable feedback. They're a necessary part of learning. They actually help strengthen your understanding in the long run.
So to wrap it up, we've really broken down these incredibly practical, but also quite profound tips for learning English. Everything from setting those vital bite-sized goals and really living with the language, integrating it,
Yeah, actively.
to daily speaking and writing practice, even if it's just talking to yourself.
Building that word bank with active recall.
Using those great online tools,
Yeah.
and crucially, connecting with real people.
And finally, mastering that mental game, staying positive, and learning to embrace the mistakes. It's fascinating, isn't it? How these seemingly simple pieces of advice, when you put them all together, they paint this really complete and honestly deeply effective picture of how language acquisition works. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, maybe the real secret isn't just about the specific steps you take. Maybe it's more about the underlying mindset you put to it all. That courage to make mistakes, finding joy in the small wins, and realizing that learning, really any kind of learning, it truly becomes easy, or at least easier, when you actually lean into the process and find some enjoyment in the discovery itself.